good, keeping your microphones off, keeping your videos off, just to protect the broadband. It's not that we don't want to see your lovely faces or hear your lovely voices. It's just to make sure that we've got enough of the broadband space to bring these sessions to you. We really love it if you can put stuff in the chat, if you can tell us what you're up to, where you're from, what the weather's like. Hopefully it's nice and warm where you are today. And we'll be about ready to go in a minute or so. We're just going to make sure we get everybody into the session. The numbers of attendees are climbing, so that's fantastic. Okay. In a moment, I'm going to do a short introduction, but just bear with us while we get everybody into the room. As I said, just tell us where you're from, what the weather's like, what you're up to. Oh, I can see somebody from Oxfordshire. Lovely. I bet it's nice down there today. Nottingham. We've got, it's looking pretty nice and sunny in the main across the thing. It's quite warm. Cloudy in Nottingham it is at the moment. Okay, I think we've got everyone in the room. So I'm going to... Okay, so I'm going to do my introduction to this session. So this is the first responder session to Joe's session a moment ago with Lightbulb Moment. So thank you very much for joining us for this session. We've got Matt Kingswood from the Digital College talking to you in his response to Joe Cook's session, which you've just been in, I hope. And he's going to be talking about driving engagement through accessibility. Really looking forward to this session. We've worked alongside Matt and the team at the Digital College for some years now, and I'm sure he's got something very, very interesting to say. So without further ado, over to you, Matt, and thank you very much for doing this for us.
No, thank you, Scott. So very excited to be here this morning, and I really enjoyed Joe's session. Very engaging, interactive, and those are the kind of things I think we need to be doing when we're doing online learning. I'm very excited to be offered the chance to be a first responder. I did dress up in my nurse's uniform to get ready to be the first responder, and then obviously Scott explained what he really meant. So quick change later, and I'm ready to go. Also, I'm joined today by Emma from To Simply Learn. She's going to be keeping us on track and helping us make sure proceedings go well. So Emma, thank you very much for that. So I'm Matt, I'm CEO of Digital College. You may have come across us before in different guises, but we've got 70 plus kind of vocational training courses. We've been going for about 10 years now, and our focus has always been about helping people into employment, helping them progress their careers, but through online learning. That's what we do. So following on from Joe's session is really interesting to us because obviously Joe's talking about some of the positives and some of the negatives of working at a distance with people, working online, and this is something we see every day as well. So we thought it'd be really helpful to build on what Joe's talked about and to talk about engagement, very much in line with what Joe was talking about, but driving engagement through accessibility. So maybe taking a slightly different angle. But I think during this quick session, I think we will come back to one or two of the things that Joe did, one or two things that Joe showed us and said, actually, this is really good practice for building engagement by making things more accessible to people. So at Digital College, our mantra is around accessibility these days. And towards the end, we'll talk about one case study of things we've been working on. The presentation today, a little bit experimental. I'm changing the backgrounds as we're working through this. So hopefully you'll start to see some figures and facts and some things shown on the screen at the same time. And again, we're trying to make an accessible presentation. So accessibility, I think we all buy into it. There's nothing new here in terms of wanting to make our learning as accessible as possible. But I think as we go through this session, maybe challenge yourselves, say, are we really doing enough to make our online learning, whatever form it may be, maybe it's forums, maybe it's video, maybe it's kind of packaged courses, maybe it's classroom teaching. Are we really making it as accessible for the people that need to get to it? Or are we somewhat unwittingly and unconsciously actually excluding people from some of these great resources we put online? You know, if we were to challenge ourselves a little bit, you know, are people are people sometimes trying to dodge the issue a little bit by saying, you know, we've got support, we're building support around this. But then again, are we really just kind of fudging the issue a little bit? Is it a little bit like us selling a used car? It's not on really top performance, and kind of package it with a bit of AA cover just to fix the issues there. And I don't know how many of you people recognise the image there, and something for the young people there. That's Arthur Daly. Right, this is where you click and pray that actually we've got the right things going on here. Right, okay, so the consequences we just talked about briefly of not including people, of not having accessibility. You know, we're talking about exclusion of maybe subgroups that we're trying to help. It may be unconscious, it may be bias that we're not really aware about. I think all these things, as I say, come into synchronous and asynchronous learning. So asynchronous learning, where you're just letting people consume in their own time. Synchronous learning, where we're kind of driving the timeline, driving the agenda through classrooms and what have you. We actually have loads of good statistics that are available to us, and we're going to just show you where you can get those statistics and maybe give you a bit of a teaser about some of the useful numbers that are coming out. But there's actually loads of good stuff out there that will help you inform your decision, maybe help you put together some reports and things that then you can influence the decision making of others. So we'll take you through that as well. But before we do too much further, I'm going to pick up on one of the things that Joe said. We're going to go for a quick poll. So I just need to flip my screens for a second here and try and work out what I'm doing. And we're going to go for our first poll. And let's just launch that now. It's a specific question, but we're saying amongst your cohort of potential learners, so the people you would expect to be working with, we've got a list here, but which would be the biggest barrier, in your opinion, to engagement in online learning? And maybe online learning, you know, kind of flexible how you define that. But we're really trying to get a view of people's impressions about what those challenges will be. While you're filling that in as well, we've also got the chat room going up here. Scott Parkin, a blast from the past. Yeah, I guess that was Arthur Daly. Taught a lot of us slightly older people some good business practice. But any questions and things, by all means, please add them to the chat as we go along. This is a good moment as well to do that. And with Emma's help, we'll try and just at various points answer those questions. So we've got a bit of a running for a minute now. So about 75% of people have voted. I'll give it another 30 seconds maybe, just for you to put your notes in here. We've got some interesting responses, and I hope by people participating, we can share these numbers and get a bit of a feeling outside of our own community groups, etc., our own projects. We can see what the challenges are in the broader population as well. Right, yeah, we've got nearly 20 people. I'm going to end the polling, and I'm going to see if I can just present that. Let's try and share the results. I hope that's sharing the results. Emma, does that look like it's sharing okay to you?
Yeah, Matt, I've got it.
Yeah, sorry, got it.
Yeah, no worries. You had me nervous there. So look, there we go. I had no expectations of what this would say, but it's interesting, isn't it? Access to the necessary computer. We've defined that in a certain kind of way, the necessary computer. We'll talk about that and what that means going forward. That's actually one of the trends that's changing. We will cover some of the other things there. But there you go. Access to a computer is what nearly half our respondents think that's going to be an issue. Right, so I'm going to get rid of that poll. Hopefully it's now back to me, and I'm just going to crack on with our little presentation here. So
for those people who haven't, the poll hasn't disappeared off their screens, they can just press the red X at the top left-hand corner.
Great, there you go. Right, so move on to our next slide. So accessibility, I think I talked about, we've got some great stats here. So after this presentation, by all means, I can send links and provide resources, but have a look at what Ofcom do. Ofcom provide a lot of surveys. There's 2 big annual surveys a year that talk about digital inclusion and also usage trends, things like trust, definitely a good resource. We've pulled together 3 figures here. So around 15% of the general population of the UK will have what the British Dyslexia Association call a specific learning difficulty. Again, a similar percentage, around 13% of the population in the UK don't use internet. Another example will be 17% of the population will have some form of hearing loss or hearing impairment. Broadly speaking, a rule of thumb, it's about 1.6 and between 1 in 6 and 1 in 5 of the population will be having individually one of those problems. And obviously, if you start to merge them together, you can easily see that a large percentage of the population do have some kind of barrier to accessibility. I'm sure a lot of you are sitting there thinking, well, yes, but on my project, there's a lot more people than that. And you're going to be right, absolutely. And we'll delve into that a little bit more. But yeah, and I think the other thing we could throw in there as well, I think the latest figures I saw from DWP was 22% of the population are registered as disabled as well. So that starts to give you a show about how these things start to bubble up. And when you actually start to think about online learning, there's a significant proportion of the population may have one or more challenges accessing online learning in whatever form that may be. So again, I'm going to steal one of Joe's ideas. Got my money's worth this morning. On the chat, maybe just throw in there, so you get this going, what your thoughts are and what might be preventing people to accessing online learning. So a bit like the poll we had previously, but a bit more free format. So maybe you have some other ideas on what you think that are preventing people from accessing online learning. And that could be online learning in the format of, again, classrooms, accessing webinars like this, or maybe even just the downloadable stuff. So if anybody wants to just throw some comments up there. So Alan's gone, well done, Alan. You win the prize for the first one there, access to tech and internet. And I think that's something we're going to hear time and time again. But I don't know if anybody else would like to throw on something else. Concerns about sharing personal data, confidence, fear coming in there, familiarity, absolutely. The one around sharing personal data is really interesting. I haven't got the data points with me, but if you went into the Ofcom surveys, there's actually some very specific data around concern about sharing personal data. And obviously, the levels of comfort change with the age of people, even demographics, social economic status, etc., etc. People's confidence around sharing personal data. We've actually got a lot of information about that now, and that's something you can delve into. So great, there you go. And the chicken and egg, yeah. How do you get people working online if they're not working online? That's a big problem, isn't it? It's that catalyst, I think. And then learning styles, yeah. Everyone's an individual. We'll maybe pick up a little bit later, but everyone's an individual. And if you think about their barriers to access, their history, what they've done at school, all those kind of things make us all individuals when it comes to the challenges of accessing things online. Right, that was really good feedback, so thank you very much for that. I'm going to try and move on here to one more slide. So here we go. So here are some of the factors that typically crop up. So specific learning difficulties. English is a second language. We get that a lot at the digital college, especially people going into jobs like construction, healthcare, and things like cleaning, warehousing. English is a second language may be a bit of a barrier for some people. Internet access, I've heard that loud and clear from yourselves. We'll talk about really the multi-levels about internet access in a second. Hearing impairment, visual impairments, we can include things like even things that we tend to forget about, things like colour blindness, and there's also physical barriers. Something we're conscious of at digital college is not throwing everybody onto mobile phones because we worried about people's motor skills. It's all these little things come together. And as I say, different people will have different amounts of these barriers. We're all individuals, which makes catering for people sometimes a challenge. But these are our factors. I'm just going to dive into internet a little bit more closely. We're obviously an online learning organisation. Internet access is a number as a whole is a big thing for us. Within it, there's obviously many different reasons why people do or don't have internet access. There's the simple yes or no. Yeah, I have internet, I don't have internet. But there's also things like devices. Yeah, I can access the internet, but I don't have a computer at home, or I only use a smartphone. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The two figures that are showing up here, so 15% of people, well, we said on our teasers, our summaries, 95% of the population have a mobile phone, so why do we have a problem with digital exclusion? Well, the reality is that 15% of people don't have a smartphone. And probably that number will be a little bit higher, a more recent smartphone. There's also another stat that might be of interest to you. 25% of the population are on pay-as-you-go contracts. And when we were doing a bit of research for this presentation this morning, The Guardian had an interesting piece, and they were talking about a scheme in Manchester where 75% of the participants were on pay-as-you-go, and it was starting to cause barriers because they ran out of data, they ran out of calls, maybe they put £10 on a month, and that was all they could afford. Pay-as-you-go actually is a barrier for people. So it's, again, something we need to think about, which talks about, on my factors above here, bandwidth. So we're quite conscious that bandwidth isn't unlimited for people. So if you're on a pay-as-you-go contract or a £5 gift contract, we have to think as online learning professionals, how are they going to be able to consume all this great content? And sometimes there's simple things like we might have 5 people sharing a church hall. How's that Wi-Fi going to handle it as well? So bandwidth kind of comes into one of the main factors as well. So, so far we've looked at the broad factors. I guess we've narrowed in a little bit into the internet access factors as well. Right, time for our second poll. Right, here we go. I'm just going to move the screen again. I was looking at your comments in the chat while we'll just bring that poll up. So let me just get this second poll going. Emma, how do I think I got it. I'm trying to find the second poll. Here we go. Second poll's coming now. Right.
You've got it. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. There you go. You see, I can't do these things. So our second poll. So I'd like to get a percentage. I think we've identified getting people equipment or the internet is a big problem. But maybe we could all share our experiences, and we can go away from this saying, this is how big the problem is. So we've got responses racking up here. And the reason I'm quite interested about this, I did a talk the other week to a group looking at barriers for older workers accessing the internet, and people were telling me stories that was, on their schemes, it's over 90%. But we'll delve into that in a minute, why that might be. Right, okay, so well over 20% responses, that's fantastic, so thank you very much for that. If I click end polling, I'm just going to share the results with everybody. There we go, I think we're kind of saying 25 to 50% of people on the project may have issues, but there's also, a lot in that 50 to 75%. So, and then quite a few 75% plus. So it looks like in our projects, there is, some major issues getting equipment and internet to people, which is obviously much worse than the national statistics are portraying. So Emma, quick question. Is there any way we can capture that to replay later? Will that be available afterwards if I put it into a post or something?
So the poll?
Yeah.
I mean, it'll be in the recording anyway, but we can take the
Yeah.
details, no problem.
Yeah, so we'll try and find, because I think it's quite interesting, we'll try and share with people afterwards. So I'm going to click on the X just to close that poll. So thank you very much for that. We'll grab that. So we said screen grab it. Yeah, absolutely. Right, I'm going to go back in and continue with my little backgrounds. So we've talked obviously about getting people internet access. So why don't I just throw up the next slide here, which is talking about subgroups. So 13% of the people don't have internet, but clearly our experience is a lot more. And there's many drivers as you'd expect. So if we look at Ofcom, one of the big ones that Ofcom identify at the moment around digital exclusion is probably as you expect, is around social economics. But they actually have some stats for us, and they're saying people in the DE, social economic grouping, in their households, 13% of the household, which is obviously quite a serious problem, do not have any internet access at all, compared to just 3% of the ABC ones, and so on and so forth. So as we start to see, subgroups start to matter, and that's just one little example. If I just click on the next subgroup, let's look at the disabled non-users. So these are people who are obviously registered as disabled, aren't using the internet. So 33% of disabled users are probably not internet users. Based on data slightly old, that'll be probably going down a little bit, but based on ONS data, 33% were not internet users. That's much bigger than the population as a whole, 13% as we'd expect. But we also have some other stats. The little blue number, 82% of internet users will actually consume internet on the go, which is quite interesting about accessibility for online learning, because that means you can access online learning in your lunch hour, you can access it on the bus, maybe somewhere else, not in the house. If your house is very noisy, there's no space. If you can access internet and online learning on the go, that's quite a big thing. For disabled people, that's just under 60%. So clearly accessing online learning is going to be much more of a problem on the go for disabled people. So these are the kind of things we need to start to think about when we're planning how we put our online learning together. So those are two subgroups. One that we can debate: older people, are they tech savvy? Are older workers a specific group that have issues accessing internet and online learning? The data seems to suggest probably they're not a massive difference between the older workers, let's say, and the younger workers. About 17% of older people don't access the internet. So that's only slightly higher than the 13% overall. And the other interesting stat over there is I'm sure, especially with lockdown, well over 60% of older workers are used to consuming things like videos and things online. So actually, I think probably older workers are probably, probably as tech savvy as the rest of the population, generally speaking. The 95%, if you're interested, because you pointed the wrong way, the 95%, that's 95% have mobile phones. Again, probably just over 80% actually have a smartphone. So very similar to the general population. And I think I can probably demonstrate that on the next slide. Here we go, a little graph here. So our older workers are kind of at the bottom of where the curve starts to go up as he tries to put his finger in the right position. There we go. So over a little bit more. So just there we go. I'll never make a particular weather presenter. But that 17% there is our older workers, 17% of them accessing the internet. Really, when you talk about older people having issues accessing the internet, it seems to really obviously taking off retirement age and above. It's obviously not a factor of retirement, it's just when computers started coming into schools and things, which was obviously around about, what was that? Round about the late 80s, early 90s, maybe, when computers started to go into schools, which obviously makes a big difference. Obviously, as time moves on, that curve will shift to the right, and we'll see workers within the working population, internet access probably is not going to be such a big thing by age. Right, so we just talked briefly about potential trends here, but let's talk about the trends of internet access. So it's around 13% today of non-internet usage. And Ofcom in their report last year kind of said internet usage, non-internet users, is pretty static now, which is interesting because I pulled the report a year or two earlier and it was talking about how it's going down. It appears that non-internet usage is actually starting to flatten out, which has consequences for us when we're planning our online learning. It's not a problem that's going to go away anytime soon. It may not be a problem that goes away for a decade, who knows? So we need to make sure that we bake in this whole idea, which I think you actually raised through the polls. Non-internet usage is here to stay, unfortunately, for a while. So yeah, you can see those stats there. As a matter of interest, when Ofcom survey people to say, why don't you use the internet? The number one reason is actually on the survey, I don't see the point, I don't see the need, I don't need it. And that's, as you can imagine, is a mindset that's quite difficult to overcome. But probably as soon as people realise they do have a need, probably other barriers kick in at that point as well. So things like money, equipment, and so on and so forth will kick in. But for that 13%, over half of them think there's no need there, they don't have a need for the internet, which is also bear in mind. It's a bit more work required to maybe get people connected. And somebody talked about the chicken and egg, how do we develop online skills if they're not online? So, we're making good progress, I think, on our talk. The internet's still working, so let's keep going. Next trend, probably a more interesting one. Smartphone only usage is a trend, it's a thing. So what do these stats mean? There's a question as I reach for my notes. 34% of all adults don't use a computer to access the internet. So they're using smartphone, tablet, maybe smart TV, those things. 34% of adults don't use a computer to access the internet. And that's exploded. That's gone up from just 6% 5 years ago. The 11% figure is what they're tracking as smartphone only. So just over 1 in 10 people don't use a computer, they just use a smartphone to access the internet. That has big consequences if we want to deliver online learning. That means the trend is very much that people are moving towards mobiles. And we did a thing, as I say, the other week about older learners. The feedback we got there was actually a lot of older workers are actually asking for their, when being offered equipment, are asking for mobile phones and tablets. I think our love affair with the laptop outside the work may be waning. So this obviously has repercussions for how we deliver online learning, and also, you know, when we're planning this. Demographics and age, if we look again at the DE social economic status, grouping, you can see that actually it's far, far higher. 53% of people within that demographic don't use a computer to access the internet. And look, over 24%, and I'm sure that figure's higher now, so probably at least 1 in 4 of people in that working age group are only using a smartphone to access the internet. So good news, bad news. Good news, maybe we can reach them with mobile phones. Bad news, we can't rely on content and ways of working that maybe rely on a laptop without some additional work. I'm charging ahead here and not really looking at the chat. So let me have a quick look at the chat here just to see how the comments are going. Yeah, Andrew says some people just don't want to be connected. That's absolutely right. That's very much what Ofcom are telling us. Yeah, I think that's very true. Right. Okay. So at this point we move on. Right. So what should accessible learning look like? Well, let's build on our last point. It probably should embrace smartphone learning, ideally. So if you're trying to deliver classrooms, you're trying to do interactivity, how can that work with smartphones? And the other thing we touched on earlier, I think online learning, accessible learning, how do you do it? You really need to think about making it low bandwidth, offering low bandwidth options. Because again, you know, we don't all have these fully consumed data tariffs. Next one up. Yeah, we think internet, hey, here's a thought, why don't we make it easy to use? So, really simple idea, easy to read. Let's bring in things like narration as well. You know, are we catering for people with specific learning difficulties? And simple to use. You will not believe the number of times we've kind of looked at other learning management systems and we've been invited onto other learning and the screen is just awash with buttons and things and events. And for a lot of people, that could actually provide challenges. So our system, we just have a big green learn button. Come in, click the link, green learn button, and off you go. So keep it simple. Now, obviously the challenges there. What about all these content, the features, the functionality, introducing forums and things? Yeah, that's a challenge. Keeping it simple and having the functions and features there is going to be a challenge. But I would, you know, really strongly encourage everyone to think about, you know, do I need all this stuff on the screen? What's the minimum I can get away with? Yeah. And while I have a quick look over here, yeah, data poverty, free broadband, those kind of things. Yeah, I think that's going to remove a lot of barriers when we talk about things like bandwidth and access to resources. Right. I don't know how many of you have come across UDL before. I've kind of forgot what UDL stands for, but I think it's Universal, what is it? Universal Design for Learning. There you go. And it has 3 core concepts, which we come up with multiple times when we think about what does good learning look like. So UDL is based around 3 things. So multiple forms of engagement. And I think Joe really demonstrated what that could look like. you know, let's use stamps, let's use interactivity, let's use chat. Maybe there's forums, maybe there's webinars, maybe people can consume a recording afterwards. All these things help people engage with your learning in different ways. By offering multiple forms of engagement, as we said earlier, there's many factors why people can't access courses, and you're hoping to cater for the individuals that have those accessibility issues. Second one down, multiple models of presentation. So I guess engagement is that whole, obviously interacting with you. You know, is it face to face? Is it through the stamps on the board? I guess the multiple models of presentation is around, is it webinars? Is it a classroom type thing? Is it printed notes? Is it downloadable? You know, again, think about how people can access it in different ways. And models of representation will help things like bandwidth issues. Some people may go for the full HD video. Other people, if you're struggling a bit with data, may go for snapshots and images and what have you, a more cut down version. And then the final thing, multiple opportunities of expression. And again, I think we probably saw that in Joe's session. So expression, you know, let's use chat. So, you know, there's obviously emails, there's forums online. Again, different people may have different challenges communicating with us. It may be harder for some people, especially if you're not comfortable in their IT, to interact on a chat session right now. But maybe they can bang out an email later and we can have a chat at a slightly slower pace to help them through the issues as well. So there you go, UDL, well worth looking. Do a quick Google, universal design for learning. And yeah, I think those are three really good principles to work to. I'm rapidly running out of time here, but three more quick slides. Yeah, the final one here is user configurable, user flexibility, and keep it bite-sized. Again, let your learners, give them the degree of flexibility that they can actually engage with you and your sessions and your content online and your tutors. Give them flexibility to consume it how they want to consume it. And then, you know, you can help them self-manage their accessibility issues. And that's probably one of the areas where the online learning resources and the plans that I've seen probably would do with the most thinking, the most alternatives. I think we as learning professionals often go in with an online learning program design, thinking of a syllabus, and we just go straight ahead, and this is how it will work. Or maybe different people need to pick a different path through our learning to get to the end result. And somebody was telling me a lovely story the other day about a police officer they were working with on a radio show. He volunteers his time on a radio show, and they do their plans. This police officer has dyslexia. He plans his radio show using pictures. So he actually draws out little images of what the show, the running order is going to be. And he has clearly picked his path about how he wants to work with things. And I think we need to think about more of that in learning. So, can I find my last slide? Yeah, here's my last slide, more or less. So case study, we deliver CSCS card learning online, and we've tried to learn from some of this. So we try and make things very clear so we can support people, especially with reading difficulties and English as a second language, things like narration. We also try and embrace smartphone learning. So things work on laptops and smartphones, which is very important when you start delivering things like interactive quizzes and the like. You've got to really think, is that going to work on a smartphone? It's about the steak, not the sizzle. Yeah, online learning, when people start to deliver, you know, these great things with all the features, it can really confuse people and get in the way. I think really content first is definitely the way to go. And then the final thing is around accessibility. We also need to think about assessment. Assessment is a big thing around obviously qualifications. With CSCS cards, you need to be assessed for a qualification for that in particular. So we've offered proctoring, which is internet-based exams, which is great. Reaches a lot of people and addresses a lot of accessibility issues. People can take it at home. But also, we also understand there's a lot of people it's not going to work. If your internet is not very good and very reliable, sitting an exam online with somebody watching you is going to cause problems. So we've also had to think about some flexibility and offer people a choice to do optional centres. but these things seem to work very well, and we have a very diverse and hopefully a very inclusive range of learners accessing the system. So, takeaways. Hopefully you've got some useful data points there. This is recorded, but also I think the data points that you've given us as well around the polls, I think they'll be very interesting. But also, yeah, I think I've probably highlighted about where to get some things here in terms of some data. So Ofcom, great set of data. We got some stuff from the British Dyslexia Association, and the Office of National Statistics will also provide some stuff there. And by all means, check out UDL. We talked about two trends there. So internet usage, non-users are probably going to stay fairly static until we, convince them that there's the need, and we obviously provide the mechanism to move them. And then also, I think we talked a little bit about what good looks like. So if you went back, flexibility, simplicity, those kind of things. So yeah, that is the end of our session. I've kept it to just over 30 minutes, which is quite a record for me. Managed to stop talking at the right time. So love to take any questions.
Yeah, any questions for Matt? Everyone's been very good on the chat. Everyone's been responding really well. But yeah, just any specific questions for Matt? We've got a few minutes now to answer them. Don't be shy.
I think the sun's just come out here as well. So
I think, Matt, while we're waiting, I think that, I don't think it's anything we can reconcile or solve today, but I think that data poverty argument's really, really significant. And wouldn't it be wonderful if the government did give free broadband to everyone and be a proper grown-up society? But that's not going to happen anytime soon. So without putting you on the spot, what can we do as deliverers of learning to help support people in being able to engage remotely?
Yeah, I've heard several projects doing different things. So there's been a lot of making tablets available and pre-installing them with 3G, 4G cards. So straight away that provides equipment and internet to people. If it's the actual tablets themselves are fairly inexpensive. Obviously, data costs something. Wouldn't it be nice if the government funded data for those kind of schemes? But straight away, you can really help reach a lot of people and take away a lot of those kind of data problems with preloaded tablets. Also, where especially things like housing associations, organisations that have a reasonable amount of staff, they're trying to recycle equipment and provide that to tenants and other users of their services, which is a great thing. Then it's a question of community drop-in centres. That's kind of difficult in the COVID environment, but maybe we could do a socially distanced kind of thing where we have laptops and things and we have Wi-Fi in a big hall or even in the car park or something. Why don't we, as organisations, maybe provide free Wi-Fi in a big outdoor space that people can come along and consume data? If people do have things like smartphones and tablets but are worried about, the cost of going online, that hopefully takes one of those problems away. But I agree, it's a real problem.
And Emma's right. In Cornwall, everyone go to Cornwall because you can get free Wi-Fi on a bus. I said you'd have to travel around all day to do a full accredited qualification, but there you go. It doesn't matter, does it? You get to see some of the countryside. So thanks, Emma, for that.
And Scott, to that point, I think that I think there's lots of ways of giving people data that can consume online learning. A bigger pinch point is giving people data and equipment so they can actually take formal qualifications online. And I think that's probably going to become a bigger bottleneck as time goes on, because to take a qualification, you do need very good internet, you need to be in a room, there's all these things that need to be right. So you can't just rock up a library or, as you say, go to a bus or a drop-in centre. Taking exams online is going to be a bigger challenge, I suspect.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. You're totally right. You need to have that kind of conducive, restricted environment to be able to test people effectively. I appreciate that completely. Look, there's still lots and lots of comments coming in. I think people have been really engaged with this session. Matt, it's my my pleasure and my job to tell you thank you very much for presenting today as part of the IEP and CogniSoft Digital Technology Conference. And thank you very much to you and your organisation, the Digital College. A really, really good presentation again from yourselves. Just to remind everybody that coming up, we've got Pamela Donnelly from PD Future Learning. We'll be presenting on the subject of virtual coaching with impact. That's at 1:30, so a bit of time to get a sandwich and a brew. And then following that, we have two responders again. We have Lucy Dunleavy of LearnBox and Erica Farmer of Welcome To, who are going to be talking about experience design, virtual classrooms, and creating video content. And then at the same time, we have our responders, James Chesham, Sak Awan, and Stuart Duffy from the IEP Talent Academy, talking about how to have an effective online digital presence when in a recruitment process. And then after all of that learning and all of that sitting down and listening and engaging and everything, you've got the opportunity to have your own say. So at 2:30 today and tomorrow, you'll have the opportunity for 30 minutes to come and have a networking session with us, chew the fat, as it were, have a chat, and tell us what you've learnt today and what your takeaways are and what important things you think you're going to do differently as you move on forward. That session's not recorded. It's open house and anyone can say pretty much what they want to, which I hope it's all very, very positive when we get to that point. So thank you very much to Matt again from the Digital College. Thank you very much to all of you attending, and we'll see you at 1:30.